You know that's going to be the intro to the podcast now.
Good.
So, Bill was wrong on the internet.
I was very wrong on the internet. I was wrong by a rather surprising amount.
So, in the interest of rightness, I decided to call you out. Do you want to correct your error?
So, yester episode, while we were talking about kind of barbarian cultures and the Mongols and stuff, I mistakenly said that Attila sacked Baghdad. Now that did not happen, and in fact could not have happened because Attila lived several hundred years before the founding of Baghdad.
Ouch.
What I of course meant to say was that Genghis Khan, or Chinggis Khan, or Temujin, or whatever you want to call him, was the one who sacked Baghdad. But I would have been wrong anyway, because it actually wasn't Genghis Khan that sacked Baghdad. It was one of his sons.
Oh, okay, so you were doubly wrong. You were meta wrong.
Yes. I was accidentally wrong because I simply misspoke. I was thinking of Attila because we'd previously briefly mentioned the Roman Empire, and obviously Attila fought the Romans, or some kind of like late iteration of the Romans, and that was still in my head when I was thinking of the Mongols. But it actually, in fact, wasn't even Genghis Khan that did actually sack Baghdad. It was sugar. I can't remember which one it was. It was one of his sons anyway.
I had no idea about any of this because my history is poor, so I just accepted everything you said, nodded, and we kept going. So anyhow, correction. Like, it's good to correct things.
You got to accept your mistakes. You got to,
yeah, and then you gotta adopt the right
Hulagu
answer.
Khan.
What?
It was Hulagu Khan.
Hulagu Khan. There you go.
Or Hulagu. I don't know how you pronounce it.
So we got that corrected. We got it on record, Bill. The record has been set straight. Your good name has been cleared.
Yeah.
So a bit of calendar follow-up.
Mm-hmm.
Shout out to Illyria Prime, who I believe made it on the show before.
Definitely, yeah.
Because they mentioned the International Fixed Calendar, and I'm going to put this in the show notes because I didn't realize this was a thing, and if anyone's interested in calendars, they should read it. It's essentially just what I can see, a better system for doing the calendars than we currently do here in the West. And I suppose its main trust basically is that it has 13 28-day months, and the big thing there is that it's equal weeks all the time. And from reading the Wikipedia page, there seems to be no real downside. The downsides seem to be really sort of non-existent. Like, for example, every month is going to have a Friday the 13th. And, quite frankly, who cares about that? So it's an interesting one. I'm just going to put it in the show notes for people to read.
I don't like it.
You don't like it? Why
No.
don't you like it, Bill?
Sterile.
It's sterile.
It's exactly the same every year. That's really boring.
Could one not say functional?
And I don't like that the months or the weeks start counting from Sunday. Monday is the first day of the week.
Depending on where you're from, surely.
Yeah, but for me, that's why I don't like it.
I've always liked the idea of there being a Sunday to start the week because it feels like you begin your week on a rest day. That's a kind of nice little sort of thing. Like day one, rest, and then the work in the rest of the week, as opposed to day one of the week is work, go, go, go.
Yeah.
It feels nice for me.
I suppose you could reinterpret what weekend means, that it's not the end of the week, but it is the ends of the week, like book ends, like it's on either end of the week.
Yeah, definitely. That makes perfect sense. I don't accept your criticisms. I think boring is absolutely fine if it proves to be more functional and gets rid of messiness, like uneven months and things like that. Because if we can do something that's more kind of precise and predictable, I think we should do it. But that's just a difference of taste, So that was calendars. Now, fantasy races.
Mm-hmm.
We had, I think it was Google Pixel Byte, Googleplex Byte in the subreddit mentioned that it might be a nice idea to make fantasy races based off what's the words for these? Homo sapien subspecies? I don't know the nomenclature for this. But basically, like,
Well, they wouldn't be sapiens, but they were other hominids, I guess.
yeah, other hominids, exactly. And they go, I'll link in the show notes, they go through a whole list of hominids, half of which I didn't even realize existed, and kind of some traits and physical features.
I'd heard a few of them, but not all of them. The Naledi, the Homo Naledi were new to me, and the Homo heidelbergensis.
The Homo heidelbergensis. Yeah, 7 foot tall.
Apparently. That's
Yeah.
pretty cool.
And there was a huge variety in there, which I didn't realize. I just thought all hominids were kind of just human-ish in a way and differed only slightly. But there's huge variety in there, and I think that might be a thing that's rife for exploit in terms of creating fantasy races.
I mean, I can think of there are definitely some examples of Neanderthals being used in fiction. There's the Clan of the Cave Bear series, but that's actually set in prehistory. It's set like tens of thousands of years ago, and it's about a Homo sapiens child, like a Cro-Magnon child, raised by Neanderthals.
Oh, cool.
Which is quite, it's pretty weird. it goes to some weird places, but it's quite a good read. And there's a few, I haven't read it, but I know there's a series where Earth makes contact with a kind of a parallel reality where Neanderthals were the dominant species and Homo sapiens didn't thrive.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, and there's also a film that we watched together, Edgar.
What do we... The Room? What did we watch together? I have no recollection of anything.
The
related to
13th Warrior.
The 13th Warrior. What?
With Antonio Banderas.
Yeah, but how does that involve other hominids?
The well, maybe it's not as apparent in the film, but apparently in the book, the kind of the savages that they're fighting are meant to be Neanderthals.
I thought they were Norsemen.
No, they're fighting alongside Norsemen.
Oh, okay. I don't remember the movie very well, to be fair.
Okay, no. So Antonio Banderas it becomes like a kind of an honorary Viking, but the enemy that they're fighting, it's implied apparently or suggested that they might be like Neanderthals that somehow were isolated and survived into the 13th century or whatever.
Oh, I don't remember that in the film at all.
Yeah, it's not very apparent there, but it's in the book.
Huh, so there are some examples. Now, I assume these are few and far between, because
there's not loads of them.
Yeah.
There's not loads of them. And it's an idea I'm interested in. I've considered including in some of my worlds before. But what I hate is the Neanderthal stereotype where they're just like thick, because there's not really any evidence to suggest that that's the case. And there's some evidence to suggest that they were actually pretty smart. Just not as good as communicating as we are. They didn't have as much language capacity or whatever.
Oh.
Is the current or a current hypothesis.
Yeah, I mean, but this is kind of standard fantasy races in general. Like, don't just go with the stereotype in a way. Explore it a bit more. So if the stereotype for Neanderthals is they're really thick, don't do that. Like, explore it more. Yeah, but I think that's really cool. I'd never considered exploring the hominids thing, so that might be something I might do as well. Who knows? It may make it into a future episode.
Cool.
No one knows. So yeah, now, standard fantasy races. Have you got any updates on the orcs? Anything cool happen in the subreddit you want to share?
Yes, there was one. User Zen10 suggested that one thing they've thought of for an alt history is that orcs would be a sort of a human-related, so again, some kind of hominid species, but they evolved to be ambush predators rather than endurance predators like humans were. And that would lead to a very different kind of physiology. So, it's thought that historically humans would often get their prey just by wearing them down. So they'd chase a deer, for miles and miles and miles and miles until the deer was not able to run anymore, and then the human would be able to catch it. Because we've better like long-term cardio endurance than a lot of animals. But Zen 10's suggestion is that instead they were some kind of ambush predator, so they were just like big and scary and stealthy and would hide and burst out on top of whatever animal it was and catch them that way. And that's really interesting. That's like pretty scary when you think about it.
Wait, hold on. Maybe I've got this wrong in my head, but ambush predators, are they not going to be the opposite of big and scary? Are they not going to be like slight and maneuverable? Not
necessarily, no.
I'm thinking a cheetah here, as in like it's able to go from 0 to 60 in like whatever it is, but then it can't do endurance stuff. Like the image I get in my head when I think ambush, I think of like a cheetah build, as opposed to like a big lumbering, scary sort of creature.
I don't think cheetahs are ambush predators because they do chase. It's a short-term chase. But there are other kinds of cats that are ambush predators, yeah. Panthers and things, I think.
Oh, maybe my definition of ambush predator is completely wrong.
Possibly.
That's interesting.
I'm thinking like they're stealthy or whatever, and they lie in wait, but they're still like strong enough to kill on a first blow or whatever.
Okay.
Crocodiles.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. So, are able to hide, and then when the prey is really close, they just maul them in one.
Yeah.
Or KO out of nowhere sort of job. Wrestling reference, do you get that?
I don't know what the or is, but I understand the KO.
Or KO is, oh god, people who like wrestling are going to kill me because I'm going to get it wrong. It's there's this guy called Randy Orton, I believe. I think it's Randy Orton, and his like special move is the RKO. Like I'm assuming the Randy knockout. And the whole shtick is that it comes out of nowhere, and the commentators always go RKO out of nowhere, and it's like it's funny because it's entirely predictable that he's going to do these RKOs, and they don't come out of nowhere. But there's like this thing, and I like it. So there you go, bit of wrestling. That's really cool. Orcs as an ambush predator.
Yeah, and then like they'd evolve very different cultures and things because I'd imagine as ambush predators it would be hard to develop the kind of like you probably wouldn't develop agriculture, and with agriculture you wouldn't develop the surplus of production that's necessary for civilization as we understand it. But if you're still giving them like assuming a similar level of intelligence, then you could do interesting things with that, I think.
Yeah, it totally breaks what I think orcs are, because I think of like hordes of marauding orcs, but that's an endurance feat. Like they go through the plains and they're constantly wandering around and things like that.
Yeah,
that's really interesting.
Yeah, from a kind of a biological competition point of view, it would be hard for them to outperform humans in human areas, but it would also be hard for humans to push them out of orc areas.
Who left this comment again?
Zen 10.
Yeah, this is good. This is really good. Yeah, I'm impressed, and I'm coming up with many scenarios now. This is cool. Well done, Zen 10. Anything else on the orcs that came up?
So there was some interesting discussion on my my idea that they were sort of atavistic parasites, that the blood could pop up in humans after generations, but nothing. It was more kind of questions about it and people spinning that off into interesting ideas. So it's always great to see fans engage that way.
Oh man, I love the sub. I love the sub so much. I know I've said it before, and it's a bit self-aggrandizing because it's like, oh, we got the best sub. But I think we got the best sub. I love our sub. So is that follow-up? That's follow-up done, I believe.
Yeah, that looks like it. Is flags part of follow-up?
Kind of, sort of. Let's give it its own section. Flag corner. So this isn't
flag corner.
This isn't flag corner because these are, I think, good flags. Dare I say it, because I made one of them. So updates on the Artifexian podcast flag from the last day. I've changed it. A Redditor suggested that it could do with changing, and it did. And I've made the bottom portion of the flag, links in the show notes, white, and I really like this flag. And I think the white, I think, is amazing because it makes it look more like a planet. And it also, like, the white is kind of like this blank canvas that we kind of create onto. Like, we literally have to fill in this world with, like, land masses and all that sort of jazz that we do as world builders. So I think the symbolism works really well. So thank you to the Redditor who pointed it out, whose name I have forgotten. So I need to find you again.
Put it in the show notes anyway.
I will, but give me a second here. I do want to credit this person because they were really cool. So it was, after a quick look through the subreddit, it was u/Kirkman. So thank you. Brilliant design change. Really, really like it. So I think that's it. I think that's the flag. I am happy with this flag. So there you go. The official podcast flag. Mm-hmm. Are you happy with the flag, Bill? Do you like it?
It's flaggier.
It's flaggier. This is good.
It's definitely flaggier. I did actually really like the one with the two blues. And I liked how that was close to the visual brand that we've developed so far.
Again.
But this is a really nice design, and it is way flaggier.
Thank you. Are you happy to adopt it as the official flag?
Yes.
Cool. I will, now that we've decided on the design, I will take it on the medieval battlefield, and it'll be all guts and glory. It'll be great. So another flag, the last flag I want to bring up is a listener flag by u/LeEpic, which is another great username. And I really like this because it is reminiscent of Pink Floyd, and it kind of has cool symbolism related to the podcast. It is, really quickly, it's a black background, and there is a white diamond in the middle. There's like a red ray and a sort of bluey purpley ray hitting that diamond from the left-hand side, and then on the right-hand side, there's like, it explodes into rainbow colors. And the whole thing is that it's meant to be like Pink Floyd's Dark Side of the Moon, and also that the red and the blue represent our different ways of doing world building, like the things we bring to this podcast, and then they kind of meet in the middle, stuff happens, and then there's an explosion of, like, I don't know, talking, I guess, and like creativity and all this ideas sort of thing. And I think it's really class, and I really like that sort of black with strong colors aesthetic. So links in the show notes for people to check out. I really enjoyed this flag, and it's very unflaggy. Like, I like it because it's a nice piece of design work that isn't necessarily like, you know, the tricolor and things like that. So yeah, congrats to LeEpic. I really, really enjoyed this one.
It's also a callback to one of our very first episodes.
Is it?
Yep.
Huh. How so? Have I missed something here?
The red ray and the sort of blue purple ray, they're knitting needles.
Are they knitting? Was that expressly stated?
That was part of the discussion, yeah.
Oh, I totally forgot about that. They're knitting needles. Yay!
Remember we had the whole thing in the first episode or the second episode?
Wow, yeah, that was a long time ago, man.
It was, just over 2 years.
Just over 2 years. That's crazy. Yeah, the whole thing about knitting as a creation myth. Mm-hmm. How did we even get onto that? Oh yeah, you were saying that knitting is magic. It just came out of nowhere. And that spawned the discussion, and now it's led to a flag.
No, I think it was that you said we could, you could theme world building around anything, and I chose knitting as a random example, and then I was like, but I actually do kind of consider it to be witchcraft.
This is testament to the fact that when you say something on the internet, it stays. And it will be elaborated on. In this case, it's a good elaboration. But sometimes you say stuff on the internet, you're kind of like, I wish I didn't say that on the internet, like Attila the Hun burns Baghdad. And then people will riff off that for the rest of all existence.
I'm fine. I've owned it.
You've come to terms.
None of us are human, you know?
We're all homo... What was one of the words you said? Florence?
Heidelbergensis.
Anyhow, so those were the two flags I wanted to bring up, and I think that's everything under the branch of follow-up covered for this month.
I think it is.
Okay, so Bill, I've been doing some world building over the past month. Predominantly, I've been looking into temperature,
Okay.
like as in calculating the temperature of planets, because it's kind of trippy, and it's one of those things that no one ever really pays attention to in world building. Just kind of go, the planet is like Earth temperature, that sort of crack. So this annoyed me, and I was like, I must understand this temperature thing. So I went and like looked through the formulas to do all this jazz, and then I came to the conclusion that it is in fact really boring and no one should really care about temperature, save for one thing, right? And that is a thing called albedo. Do you know what albedo is?
It's the amount of light absorbed or reflected by a body.
Bingo. Okay, so when computing the temperature of a planet, you take into account the star's luminosity, the distance a planet is from the star, and its greenhouse effect, and its albedo. So there's like 4 components to the thing. So the actual end result of like, oh, your planet is like 15 degrees is kind of, who cares? But the albedo, I think there's something in the albedo that I've stumbled across, and I don't think anyone treats albedo the way I'm about to propose. So I'm just going to put it out there and see what you think, and we'll call for criticisms and all that sort of jazz. If one, like you, say you have 100% of the albedo of a planet, yeah? The 100% of its reflectivity. That's going to be broken down into different like biomes. Like say a desert will have a certain...
What do you mean by 100% of its reflectivity?
Let's like whatever that value is. Like for Earth, that's like 30. Okay, just
okay.
That like that's
so you know exactly what the albedo is.
Yeah, you know exactly. Say you know exactly what the albedo is. In that albedo, there will be a breakdown, or there should be a breakdown of biomes and how they contribute to that. So, like, deserts will have a certain type of reflectivity, and snowy biomes will have another type of reflectivity. Water will have another again, and all of this adds up to be your overall albedo, and then that gets plugged into the equation, right?
Yeah.
So I think what is really good and pertinent, I think, is to compute, like to figure out what is a Earth-like albedo if you're going for habitable planets, and then fit in all the biomes within that and let that determine what sort of maps you're going to make. Are you with me?
I don't know what you mean by what sort of maps you're going to make.
Right, so if, let's say the albedo, let's just put any number just for the sake of argument. Let's say the albedo's 10, right? And you decide to dole out 2 of that value to snow, for example. And you decide to dole out 3 of that value to desert, and 4 of that value to water, and that sort of thing. In jiggering the numbers there to try and get your albedo right, you're essentially determining what biomes your planet will have and how much of the surface area they'll take up. So
right, so when you say map making in this context, you don't mean the terrain exists and you are mapping it. You mean determining what the terrain will be.
Exactly, because I think...
So actually building the terrain.
Like actually building the terrain and using that to determine... to give yourself a set of constraints for your map making, because I think most people, they just go and make a map, which is entirely fine, but maybe that map will not be conducive to like human life. Maybe there's too much ice or whatever, and that makes the planet too reflective and hence too cold, and then no humans. Or maybe there's not enough ice, so it's too warm. So I think like looking at temperature of a planet before one goes into map making, I think is actually a real solid thing, and it can inspire you to be like, oh, there's all these different things that I can do on the map. Does that make sense?
It does make sense. Is it as straightforward as that you can say the albedo is 10 and I will use 2 of it to be ice? It seems like the kind of thing that should be a little bit more complicated.
See, again, now, this is kind of a hard thing to determine because no one really pays attention to this. But the impression I get is that it is kind of like that. You just basically decide what percentage of your surface is going to be a certain thing. And there is a set of albedo values for whatever that material is. And then you just add up the albedo values and then
Yeah, but you have to take into account like surface area and stuff as well, and proportionality. Like that comes in. It's not just a simple geometric thing. Like you have to take into account proportions and stuff, I'm assuming.
Well, yeah, but insofar as that you work with percentages.
Percentages of what?
Of the overall surface area.
Right.
Like you say a thing like, I want to set 90% of my surface area to be snow. That means that will give me a certain amount of reflectivity, and then you can plug that into the thing, into the temperature equation, and then it'll spit back out something. And if it happens to be an Earth-like value, again, if you're going for habitable planets, you're like, oh, cool, I can have 90% of my map be snow, and that's entirely cool. Or you might have to jigger it, like, you might be like, oh, crap, I actually can't have this much snow. I actually have to have way more water in order to, like, bring it down into manageable temperatures. So it puts a constraint on map making as opposed to, like, I'm going to go into Photoshop, set up this fractal thing, and if it looks pretty, that's my map, which is entirely fine. But I think this is a thing that no one does, and I think it's a thing that can be quite interesting.
Okay, I see where you're coming from. This does make sense. Do we have, or do you have, a range of values that make good, habitable, plausible planets?
Yeah,
for Earth-like habitation.
Not officially, but unofficially, I would say something that just feels Earth-like. Like I think the value on the Wikipedia page is 29 for albedo. That's a dimensionless thing for anyone listening. That's just a value. We'll just take it as that is 29.
There's no units.
There's no units, no. So if I seen someone's albedo being like 31, 32, 27, that sort of thing, I'd be like, oh, that's fair enough. And anyways, you would plug an albedo value into your temperature equation and it would spit out a temperature. So if the temperature's way out of whack, like if you're coming up with a temperature that's like 80 degrees Celsius on average, then you're kind of like, well, hang on, now this is no longer Earth-like. So again, then you have to go back, rejigger your biomes, and then plug it again, and then keep going until you get something that feels Earth-like. And then you can use that to inform your map making.
Yeah, and that answers my next question, which is presumably you can have a fairly big range of albedos if you assume a different level of greenhouse.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you could make the greenhouse effect stronger, and then that would affect your reflectivity. And because there's so many variables in a temperature equation, like the luminosity and distance, there's a whole lot of things you can play with as well. So it's not like it's you must have like Earth's albedo, and then there's only a couple of solutions to what biomes. Like I think it's fairly wide open.
What about? Let me think about this for a second. Pressure, atmospheric pressure. You could have ice at higher temperatures than ice exists here at sea level with different atmospheric pressures, couldn't you?
You could, but then we're getting...
Or does that only really affect the boiling point?
No,
Or maybe it doesn't affect the freezing point enough, rather.
It might do, but then we're into a different debate about atmospheres, and atmospheres are a thing that I am scared of.
Well, I just mean it's a way that you could have surface ice over a large area, even if the temperature would seem that it shouldn't be possible. If the temperature was slightly too high, it might be possible.
That's true, but remember, atmospheric pressure is going to play a role into what sort of life you can have. Like if you've got a crippling, crushing atmosphere.
Of course, yeah.
You know, you're not going to have stand-uppy humans on their two legs. You know.
Well, I mean, like, we could probably survive in, like, a couple of extra atmospheres.
I know this. Oh, there's a value in that Habitable Planets for Man paper. Stephen Dole gives a value for what the atmospheres we could survive in. I can't remember. I think it was something like that, like 1 or 2 extra atmospheres, and I think would still be okay. But 1 or 2 extra atmospheres, I don't think will lead to a scenario whereby you can have ice that isn't usually ice.
Right.
I think you really have to go the whole, like, deep within Uranus there could be ice, that sort of pressure.
Right.
Like real, like, planetary, like, heavy gas giant like pressure to crush stuff into ice that shouldn't be ice. I don't know that at all, but that's an interesting point, though. The thing I was going to say, just as a follow on to this, is that I think this sort of like temperature as a prerequisite for mapping, I think is like, and especially because it works on percentages, like it's really good for people who design Settler of Catan like worlds, because then it literally is like if you have 100 hexagons, you can really easily just be like, oh, 1% of my planet has to be snow. 1 hexagon is snow. And like, I think that's really cool and really interesting. I would fully admit that this is a convoluted solution to map making, and clearly the easier approach is to just draw a pretty map, and that's fine. But I like this idea of like the numbers constrain what the map can actually be. So yeah, that was my thoughts for this month, and it's something I've been exploring a lot this month. So effectively,
I like this.
You what?
I like this.
You like this? I did not expect you to like this. I thought this would go the route of the calendars and be like another one of Edgar's like weird ideas where you're kind of like, God damn it, Edgar, why are you reinventing the wheel?
No, it's nothing at all like the calendars. I don't think at all the same way about it.
Yeah, see, I do think the same, because it's me doing, how can I use maths to make a thing? So with the calendars, I was like, how can I use like little maths tricks to make the calendar the way I want it? And this is kind of like me, how can I use little maths tricks to make the map the way I want it? So in my head, they're very the same. But I get the difference for you would be that last month, I was trying to force things to be unnatural in a way. And this month, I'm kind of forcing it to be supernatural. Like it's very, very natural. Like it falls out of like laws of the universe, as opposed to just like, oh, I'm just going to draw a thing,
I think for me, last month, it was that you were imposing a sense of order palatable to humans upon something that shouldn't really have any reason to be that way.
Oh, but it's great though, Bill.
And this time, it's not that at all for me.
I'm glad you like. I think I'm on to a winner here, and I've never heard anyone suggest anything like this. So it is something that I'm going to keep in my little bag of tricks. But the problem leading from all this is how on earth you're going to map to percentages. Like, how are you going to draw a map and be like, well, I think North America counts for X amount of percent of the planet based on my looking at a 2D representation of a 3D globe. There's problems there, but at least it kind of gives you a vague idea, like as in there is way, way, way more desert than I had initially thought. And so at least you'd be kind of somewhere in the ballpark.
Of course, deserts could have different amounts of albedo depending on what material is there.
Yeah, I suppose that's an interesting point. I think it's worth not going too far down the rabbit hole and just being like, let's just take the average here. Like Wikipedia lists a whole bunch of albedos for various different different surfaces, and I think they have one generic sand, and I think I would just go with that, as opposed to being like, well, this desert is kind of more, I don't know, rocky in a way, and it's otherwise you could spend the rest of your life computing the reflectivity of different materials.
Or, I mean, you could just say, well, I'm not exactly meeting the figures that I ought to have here if I assume all my deserts are sand. But, say this one here is rocky or particularly quartzy or whatever, then I could get it there. So I'm going to say that this desert is rocky.
That's true. Interesting as well is you can also use this working with albedo thing to figure out how a city-wide, a planet-wide city would affect temperature. Like, because like asphalt and cement are going to have their own reflectivity index. So rather than just going, I have a planet-wide city, and that's that, and like let's all be happy about it, you can actually engage with that and be like, does that work? Like maybe you have to you have to, I don't know, like pump up the greenhouse effect, and suddenly you're like, oh yeah, maybe pollutants from the city, or maybe there's less greenhouse effect, so this planet-wide city has to become like super green in order to sustain itself, and that like is triggers for stories like right away. And I think again, this is a thing that I don't think anyone ever engaged with, because they're kind of like, oh, planetary temperature, who cares? That's just a figure, like 15 degrees Celsius for the Earth. That's not that important. Whereas I think it is. Mm-hmm. There you go. So that's my thing. That's Edgar's patented work with albedo to make your maps and to plan planet-wide cities.
Excellent.
So what have you been cooking, or have you got anything else to add on that?
I don't think I do. I'm gonna mull it over. I might have something for a future episode. But yeah, I really like that idea.
Cool. I am really happy. Like, I'm genuinely beaming here, because it's like, yes, Bill likes what I've said. Woo! So what have you been doing world building wise this month?
I wrote up a rough calendar plan for Handwavia.
Calendars Part 2.
Calendars Part 2.
Part 2. This, as always, this is going to be in the show notes and like on Bill's blog and the whole shebang, so go check it out before continuing. Mm-hmm. Do you want to give us a TLDR?
What do you get from the setting, first of all?
Oh, bouncing it straight back at me.
Well, no, I just want to hear.
Okay, well, I'm going to do a brief summary just to give people context here. So we have this king.
Okay.
He's in the 35th year of his reign, and he wants to instill calendar reform, I'm assuming.
Yeah.
And really summarizing what's going on, he's instilled he wants to bring a lunisolar calendar into the world. And in particular, this is a 13-month lunisolar calendar with 14 months on leap years. And yeah, that's what I get from it. Is there anything else I'm missing?
That was exactly not what I was asking you about.
Oh, you said... there's a thing to get from it?
Is any of this familiar? The setting?
Oh, like it's in Handwavia. Sorry. This is the Nlamo.
Yes.
Okay, that's what you want me to say. Jesus Christ. Okay, so this is... Sorry, okay, right. It is a Nlamo king, King Tensha, who is bringing in calendar...
Tensha is kind of close.
Tensha's kind of close. I'm going to go with Tensha. I'm just an ignorant foreigner.
It's more like... It's not really that it's an N. It's more sort of a nasal E. But anyway.
Oh, like French pronunciation.
Kinda, yeah.
Tensha. So yeah, this Nlamo king, Tensha, wants to bring in calendar reform, and he has decided that a lunisolar calendar is the best option. Yeah?
Sure.
There's no there's no like subtext in this one. There's no like kind of thing, like there's no punch at the end. This is a weird one. This is kind of almost reads like a strict royal decree sort of thing. Maybe that's what you're going for. I don't know.
Yeah, that's what it is.
Oh, there you go.
So this is the setting. This Nlamo is the realm that's currently also being surveyed by their neighbors, their northern neighbors in the previous two installments, by the scouts. But this is actually written from the king of Nlamo, and he wants to sort of institute a standard calendar across the country he reigns over. And yeah, that's the thrust of it. I'm probably going to rewrite it slightly before this goes live, because like I kind of bashed this out. I had been doing this slightly differently, and I realized that the way I'd been writing it didn't make any sense, so I had to rewrite it as a royal decree. I'll do this slightly differently before we go live with it, but this is the gist of it. So it is a calendar primarily tracking the sun. And so the new year begins on the spring equinox.
A good choice.
Every year, because that's the start of the local wet season. That's when the rains begin, roughly. And every months are counted according to the full moon. So from one full moon to the next is a month period, and it lasts for 30 days.
Okay.
And there are 13 full months in a year, and then extra days left over on either side. And every 8 or 9 years, that kind of accumulates into fitting a full extra 14th month into the year. And so when that happens, the end of the year coincides with a full moon celebration. And that's called a golden year, for, like cultural and astrological reasons, etc. And they are considered really lucky.
There's a couple of things here I really like.
Mm-hmm.
Just going through it, I really like the way you've numbered your years. They're named after the current monarch, and then the year that they reign. I believe this is this Japanese inspired? I think the Japanese do something like that.
Not specifically, but I'm sure they do. It's like lots of cultures have done this, I think.
So it's like Tencha 36. It's the 36th year of the reign of King Tencha. I really like that. It adds a nice little cultural thing to it. The knowing how to compute calendars, or at least in my way, I look at the 8 to 9 years drift and I'm like, oh boy, that decimal is so painful. Again, no bearing on the story, but it's just like our 4-year drift is quite nice. It's a decimal of roughly 0.25. It's a nice controlled, kind decimal. But a decimal of like 8 to 9 years, like you're somewhere in between. You're somewhere knocking on what point? Was it point? What is? What? Hold on. What is that? Hold on. Give me a second.
Well, so they both have. Neither cycle lasts a whole number of local days.
Neither cycle lasts a whole number of local days. Explain that for me.
So the cycles for the moon and the cycles for the sun, neither of them is divided evenly by days. So the solar cycle is a certain number, 0.3 days long. And the lunar cycle is 30.2 days long.
Right.
So neither one is a whole number.
Okay. Are you putting in like leap days in things as well?
Not specifically. That kind of sorts itself out because of how it's reckoned.
Okay.
With the moons and the equinox coinciding.
Now, another thing. You mentioned that the month is based on the moon, the lunar period.
Yeah.
Now, is it based like on a calculation or observation? Like, as in, does the month begin when someone sees the full moon and then they go for it? And if they don't happen to see the full moon for like cloudy or whatever reasons, the month doesn't begin. Is it observation or calculation?
I mean, you're probably not going to miss the full moon for 3 straight days, like.
Well, there have been culture. Oh, I'm going to get this wrong. I think it's the Hebrew calendar that, strictly speaking, it's an observation. Like, the month does not start until someone's actually seen the moon. Now, I could be wrong about Hebrew, but there's definitely calendars that do this. And then there's ones that are kind of like, no, we just do it purely on maths, like, regardless. I just wonder, is that a thing that you've considered at all? Because I find that really fascinating that people can be like, yeah, the month hasn't started yet. We're just kind of in this sort of like Twilight Zone period.
I hadn't considered that, but let's say it's a calculation. Because they know like roughly when it's going to happen, so.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I like it. You had mentioned before to me off air that like I'm a big proponent of lunisolar calendars, and I think lunisolar calendars are the one true calendar, and that we should adopt it fast and get away from the Gregorian calendar. and you were kind of like, meh, I'm nonplussed. So it's an interesting choice that you went with a lunisolar calendar. Well, what's the jazz there? Like, why do you make that decision?
Nonplussed means surprised.
Nonplussed means surprised.
Yeah.
Oh, whatever, man. Just go with it. Thanks. I didn't know that. I'm going to have to remove that from my vocabulary. But anyhow, the general gist is there.
It just seemed, it made sense for this culture, is all.
Can you
Like,
elaborate?
I don't...
Like, why does it make sense for this culture? Like, there has to be reason, or maybe there's not, but I feel like there should be reason as to why you chose this and not, like, lunar, for example.
Not really.
Not really. You just decided that you wanted the vastly superior calendar.
I don't think it is vastly superior.
We totally shouldn't get into argument with this because we could be here all day. But
It just made sense with the they looked at the sun and they also looked at the moon, and they coincide reasonably well enough for it to be something that you can link together. With the numbers I gave it, it was like, every eight-ish, 9-ish years, they do actually happen to come together the way that they don't really on Earth. So, yeah, I mean, it seemed like a logical thing for them to do.
Yeah, see, this is why I think the lunisolar calendar on Earth is a better idea as well, because it's kind of like, we can look at the moon, we can look at the sun, they fit relatively well together if you get the right scheme of leap days and intercalation in there. And it's kind of like, why don't we all do this? Like, why is it
But
like...
no, whether or not there's leap days or whatever doesn't affect whether the actual astronomical facts. I mean, the equinox is a fixed thing, right? And the moon cycle is a fixed thing. And no matter how we call the names of the days in between them, it doesn't affect whether they actually coincide or not.
Oh, sorry. It just occurred to me as well. You made no mention of days and weeks here. Anything happening there?
No?
No? You don't know? Or they don't care?
Considering the purpose of this. So as I've established, Nlamo is not a mono-ethnic or monocultural or mono-religious realm.
Right.
As established previously. So they're going to have a lot of different ways of dividing things up. And this isn't, the king isn't doing this to supplant those. It's more for him to communicate more effectively with his provinces and to levy taxes and things. And it's not intended to replace people having their market days whenever they have their market days. It's not intended to replace them, aligning their own religious festivals based on astronomical events or any of that stuff. It's a kind of a bureaucratic thing.
Oh, yeah, so he just wants to impose like an overall scheme that everyone can fit under, so everyone's unified and can communicate with one another.
So that like he can communicate with his clients and his vassals and whatever, and they will be all working off the same vocabulary when they're talking about long scale timekeeping.
That is very interesting. That is cool. It's rare that one sees something written about a calendar and it's like not a total, like years all the way down to seconds worked out. It's like, here's a broad thing and you can work within that framework. I think that's really cool.
Yeah, because I mean, how people divide up their months, it's not really all that relevant to this. I mean, you can count, okay, we're going to meet at this location, at this town, 10 days after the fourth full moon of the year. What you do, anything, if you want to spend like 5 6-day periods or 6 5-day periods in each month, doesn't make a difference.
Question?
Yeah.
And you probably haven't figured this out, but I'm just going to throw it out there. How did Nlamo, say, thinking of one group, for example, how do they reckon the day? Have you thought about this? Like, are they like midnight?
I did think about this, but I didn't come down to a specific answer on it. I was trying to reconcile it with I was trying to reconcile the reckoning of the year with the reckoning of the day. So that like noon kind of corresponds to midsummer, right?
Yeah.
If you see what I mean?
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
the highest point. And midnight corresponds with midwinter or whatever. And I was thinking, that we have something kind of like that. Our day begins at midnight. Our new calendar day begins at midnight, and the year begins kind of around midwinter. We've changed it a little bit, but it's basically a midwinter kind of thing. And so I wanted something similar that would mirror that the daily cycle and the yearly solar cycle would have a similar kind of thought behind their construction.
Ooh, have we done the whole midnight to midnight thing for that reason?
I've no idea.
Huh. Because I always assumed it was because it's good to tick over the day when everyone's asleep.
I mean, that does kind of make sense.
Yeah, as opposed to like ticking it over, in the middle of your lunch break. A bit confusing. But that is cool. Reconcile the day with the year. That's really, and that would make sense because people would obviously have that way of thinking with the year, and then they could transpose it onto the day.
So I guess if we're thinking about the spring equinox being the start of the year, that would correspond roughly to dawn, maybe?
Yeah, and that's not entirely terrible as well, because again, it's kind of people.
Only slightly terrible.
No, I'm sorry, that's completely
Thanks,
wrong.
Edgar.
No, that was completely the wrong word. Sorry. What I mean to say is that's not terrible, because people are like waking up at dawn, assuming they wake up naturally and things like that. So the day ticks over just as they wake up, and that would make sense.
Yeah,
that would work really well. Yeah, I like it. So
now I don't know if I'll definitely settle on that. And as I said, Nlamo is a broad and varied. What's the word I'm looking for here? Diverse realm. But I would expect it's something like that for a lot of them.
Do you think everyone's going to get behind this calendar idea, or do you reckon King Tanash is kind of like?
Tensha.
I'm not even going to attempt the nasal vowels there, man. It's not happening. Do you reckon everyone's going to get behind the calendar, or do you reckon people are going to fight against this and be like, no, we reckon the years the way we want to reckon the years?
I think it's a non-issue. I mean, it's nothing stopping people using their own years the way they used to for day-to-day stuff.
Okay, so just dealing on the official level, then yeah, he wants there to be this thing to deal with. Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, like, really, what does it affect most people? If you're like farming or a blacksmith or a cobbler or something, like, what does it really matter what people call the divisions of time? You're worried about when the harvest is. You're worried about when the rains come. But how people actually call the things in between doesn't really make a difference, especially if it's respecting their diversity and allowing them to have their own festivals and call their own things by whatever name they want.
Yeah, that's true. No, I like it. It's good. It's good. A royal decree that is open to diversity. That's not entirely something one sees all the time. That's pretty cool.
I don't think I have included in what I sent you, but the in this system in Tensha's calendar, the months aren't named; they're just numbered.
Oh,
did I say that?
No.
Yeah, they're just numbered, but people will have their own names for months anyway, like or for the new moon. You know, the first one after the solstice or whatever will be called something. And that's not going to be changed by the fact that this system is here as well.
Just numbered though, are you not kind of missing out on an opportunity to bring in a bit of kind of flavour?
In a sense, yes, but that's not the purpose of that's not the purpose of from an in-universe point of view, that's not the purpose of this project. But he's not trying to make a flavorful cultural thing. It's just so that everyone can coordinate things from the same scheme.
Okay.
The king doesn't care, like. I mean, they're still going to call the harvest moon the harvest moon.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, I suppose, yeah, the flavour happens on a more local level.
Yeah, and there is lots of flavour there, and
there's
lots and
lots
lots of
of
different
flavour,
flavours.
Yeah, that makes sense. No, I like that.
No licorice, though.
We need a licorice month. The month of licorice. The licorice harvest month. We need that. That's a thing we need. Cool. I like it. I love the way it's a loony solar calendar, man. Just props. I think that's great. Like, I was sold the minute I read this and was like, tracking the moon and tracking the sun. Boom. Good.
That wasn't even really my purpose. It was just like, we'll reckon them differently. And, it actually, as it turns out, I managed to find a way that they would coincide every 8 or 9 years. Usually 8. Should I be giving specific figures here for people to work out if they want? What do you reckon?
You can put it in a separate document in the show notes.
Okay.
If you want. I'd be interested. I would be definitely interested. Because there's a neat little set of formulas. There's a Wikipedia page on this. I'll leave it in the show notes that you can run to figure out when everything kind of unites. Mm-hmm. Which is how
I didn't do any of that. I just put in the two numbers in Excel spreadsheets and then kept multiplying it down for 150 cells.
Bill brute forced it.
Pretty much. And I was like, okay, well, the full moon lasts for a couple of days, so I'll go take figures either side of this and see where it's actually going to fall, and it turned out it fell every 8 or 9 years.
Wait, so hang on. So then, do you know how much the cycle is? Because like the Hebrew calendar, for example, the cycle before the sun and the moon kind of have the same number of days gone by is 19 years. And within those 19 years, you have to do X amount of leap years. Do you know how big your cycle is before everything naturally just works out? From doing all the Excel stuff?
I don't. And I don't know that necessarily that would have been done in Nlamo.
Yeah, no, totally.
Maybe no one's bothered.
Totally. But if you're going to leave the figures in the subreddit, you can't stop me from running numbers.
No, I wouldn't try to.
It'd be interesting because, again, you look at the 8 to 9 years thing, and my immediate thought is oh boy, it could be like that. This could be 100-year-long cycle or whatever before they all meet up. And the equations are actually really handy to do these things. They're not involved at all. So yes, anyhow, TLDR, I think you should leave your numbers for people. I wonder, could you write up a separate piece with these stuff, like the king or the king's astronomer, for example, sends him the numbers that he's surveyed, because someone's obviously done this computation in the world. There's no way of constructing a calendar without doing this computation. So it might be interesting to have that dialogue, and this decree could come afterwards, after it's been delivered to him. I would be very interested in reading that, purely because I can do maths.
I will maths it.
That would be great. If you would do that for me, Bill, I would be very happy. And then we can throw both in the subreddit, maybe?
I will consider it.
Woo! Next thing, consider licorice month, all right? Well, we'll get to that. One step at a time, Bill. One step at a time. Anything else to add on that?
I don't think so.
No, that's it. Any thoughts about what you might want to do next month?
I only thought about this really this week, so I haven't really considered next month.
Bill McGrath, spending his entire month dedicated to the Artifexian podcast.
I've been very busy.
Every day he's toiling over a hot piece of paper, running numbers, doing world building. Yeah, we should
putting in long hours at the calendar line.
Long hours at the calendar line. Long unappreciated underworked hours. Overworked hours even. Yeah, cool. So that was temperature and calendars, and next month we'll have something else. I
Something
think
else, yeah. We don't have any outstanding suggestions, do we?
we don't, but on my end, anyways, I think next month will be a pretty auspicious month.
Okay,
And that's all I'm going to say on that. So
cool.
I feel like the topic will be kind of dictated by that auspiciousity. That a word?
Let's find out. Adjective pertaining to auspicious. Well, I suppose auspicious is already an adjective, isn't it?
Oh, throughout the course of this podcast, I have come up with many, many strange words. I kind of want to go back and just compile them, and make a dictionary of Edgar. The one was it the plural for jellyfish springs out of me. Jellyfy. I no joke.
Disgusting.
I no joke use Jellyfy like regularly. Like I was playing Pokemon Go the last day and a whole load of tentacles came up and I was like, Jellyfy. Like I have literally adopted it, not because I wanted to, it just like happened. It's easier than jellyfishes. It's just become part of my vocabulary. Jellyfy. So
Auspiciousness.
auspiciousness. That's not as good as my suggestion, I don't think.
Or in German. Oh no, hold on, sorry, that's just for auspicious. Let's see what the translations they have in the dictionary for auspiciousness are. Oh, there's no translations. That's outrageous. Well, I suppose since auspicious is günstig, in German it would be Günstigkeit.
Not entirely the most useful word given that this is an English podcast, but yeah, cool.
Günstigkeit. Well, it sounds like you've probably got like a lot of green room stuff to share.
Do I?
Well, you're in a different continent now.
I have legitimately not left the house since arriving here. Actually, that's not entirely true. I've done shopping. I've been down to the local market to pick up food on a regular basis.
And you went to a restaurant.
I went to a restaurant. I broke my vegetarianism.
Okay. How do you feel about that?
Totally fine because it's really, really difficult to do vegetarianism in Korea. Apparently, there's no word for vegetarianism.
What?
In the Korean language. Yeah. The captain told her workmates about me that I don't eat meat, and they were like, what? And like, not as a kind of like, oh my god, he's vegetarian. They were kind of like, I don't comprehend how someone can live without eating meat. Like, it doesn't happen. Like, everything here is meat all the time. So I am
Weird.
maintaining vegetarianism in the house. Like, when I cook, it's mainly tofu and veg. But outside of the house,
Tofu is pretty good.
Tofu is pretty good. But outside of the house, I'm really not bothered spending hours trying to find a place that may do vegetarian stuff, or having to try and like whip my like 4 words of Korean explain to them that I don't want any meat with the thing. I'm just going to go with it and just have meat, and then when I get back home to Ireland, I can be a proper vegetarian again.
Yeah.
Oh man, but you know, pork. Oh my god, pork tastes so good.
Pork is quite tasty, it's true.
I missed pork so much. We had Korean barbecue the last day, and like, oh my god, the smell of rendering pork fat, man. It's so good. Like second only to licorice. Like, oh.
You know what I made yesterday?
What did you make yesterday?
I made a stir fry with a meat I don't cook with very often. Lamb.
Feck it, I was going to put in a jellyfish joke there, man. Lamb is a really nice meat. It's a bit kind of, it gets in your teeth an awful lot, but it's a tasty.
It can do, yeah.
But it's a tasty meat. I like it.
I had some leftover lamb from home, like home, that I brought back into my flat with me, and I needed to use it up, and I did like kind of a spicy Indian kind of stir fry.
Ooh.
Very good.
The what's called things that I don't usually cook with, mushrooms. God, this has turned into food corner. You hate mushrooms. All right.
Hate mushrooms.
Listen, never come to Korea, right? Because Korea is wonderful for mushrooms. Like there are just so many different types of mushrooms, and you think we have mushroom variety back home? We haven't got mushroom variety. Like this is crazy. Like there's like these little mushrooms that are kind of really tall stalks with teeny tiny mushroom heads on them, and then there's these mushrooms that look a little bit like volcanic rock they're just like an eruption of mushrooms, and they come in a solid brick. And then there's like these big giant, almost like portobello-esque mushrooms, but they're not portobello. And then there's obviously like shiitake and all that sort of stuff. So there's just so many mushrooms.
Obviously.
And it's amazing. It's so good.
I don't trust them.
Is it because they're slimy?
I'm not sure. Like, I don't like the flavour.
Okay.
And I don't like the texture.
Well, this is problematic.
And I'm suspicious of mushroom soup because mushroom soup tastes like the texture of mushrooms, and that doesn't make any sense, and it upsets me. And also, I just generally don't trust mushrooms because they grow in the dark, and that's suspicious.
Do you eat rhubarb?
Rhubarb is a plant. It has a big leaf.
Is it rhubarb that grows in the dark, though? Yeah, I think it is rhubarb. I think it's a thing where if you put it in the dark, it grows so fast that you can like actually hear it growing.
Well, any rhubarb that I eat is just like not been that rhubarb because we used to like grow it at home, and it would grow like a normal, honest, God-fearing plant.
An honest, God-fearing plant. I think your reasons for not liking mushrooms outside of taste and texture are crazy, but man, you do you.
No, it's just not trustworthy.
Do you know what's a thing that that is causing my Korea trip to be a bit of a head wreck? Pokemon Go, right?
Right. So you've left the house to go to barbecues and to go to the market and to play Pokemon Go.
Pokemon Go happens on market trips and or while sitting at the window.
Okay.
So I haven't gone on big trips around Korea because I can't play Pokemon Go. I can't roam. Like, I've been roaming to get like the rare Pokemon, and that's already kind of cost me like more money than I would have wanted to spend. So it pains me. I can't just turn on Pokemon Go and go for massive long walks. Which is a problem. I should clarify before people write in and be like, Jesus, if there ever was a whiter, more first world person in the world, is Edgar currently being in a different country and deciding not to experience any of it. I have been here like 3 times before, and we've done the whole like go see North Korea, go into Seoul, see all the tourist attractions, and particularly because this time it's 3 months, it's kind of, this is more like we do real life. So like I work during the day. I'm not sightseeing, and I'm kind of saving money for when I go back home. So this isn't a holiday per se. This is just regular life, but in a different country with the captain. So I'm not just being a really spoiled like rich white kid who's like, I'm just gonna go fly across the world and experience none of the culture here.
Yeah, no more than usual anyway.
No, thanks, Bill. Anyhow, Korea side, because I'm not sure if anyone actually wants to hear about my being in Korea. I've been reading, or listening rather.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I've come up with a thing about old school sci-fi.
Right.
I'm not entirely sure I like old school sci-fi because it tends to, this is a trend I've been noticing, it tends to change too fast. Like, I'm reading Stranger in a Strange Land at the moment, and it's like...
Heinlein?
Timeline? I don't know.
Heinlein?
Heimline?
Is it by Heinlein?
Oh, I don't know the author. Who's the author? Hold on. Stranger in a Strange Land. It is by Heinlein. Yes. Have you read this?
No.
No. Anyway, so I'm reading it, and like it's going along, right? Spoilers happening from this point on. It's going along.
Okay, well, don't tell me too much.
Okay. I'll keep this as broad as possible without spoiling anything massive. There is an Earthling who has been raised on Mars and he's brought home, right?
Right.
And so at the start, there's kind of this like almost like West Wing like political conflict about what it means for him to be an Earthling and a Martian at the same time, right?
Right.
There's that. And then really suddenly, out of nowhere, it just changes and it feels like it's many years down the line and they're like in a circus, like he's joined a circus And now I get the impression he's forming some sort of religion, or a religion is being formed around him. And these events happen really quickly and like just really jarringly, almost as if it's like short story after short story, but that's explicitly not what's going on. And I find this a lot with old sci-fi. It's kind of like, I don't know, it feels like sci-fi authors in a way had like these ideas, and they're just like, we need to get through the ideas. And there's very little kind of like slow progression of plot and of chronology. And it really bothers me. Like, I had to go back and listen to the previous few chapters from the point I'm at the moment and be like, oh yeah, it wasn't just me. It literally just kind of jumped. And that's very jarring. And I'm not digging it. What I do dig about old school sci-fi is the funny naming conventions. They're great. Like the electric taxi copter or something like that. Like they're really funny. And I also like the way that every so often they will come up with like a centralized sci-fi thing, like a one central sci-fi thing, and it'll get a special name, and then we'll talk about that thing a lot. Like in this book, it's grok. And I don't know if you know what this is, but it's kind of like, it kind of encompasses everything about this guy's Martian upbringing, like what it is to grok a thing, and how it doesn't really have an English translation, and it's to do with worldviews and all of this sort of thing. I like the way that is in old school sci-fi, but it's not. Those two things are not enough to override the fact that it seems like plots just are very segmented and jump.
Grok is used but in kind of nerd communities a lot. I've seen it.
Yeah, I'd imagine so.
Grok.
I would imagine so.
And it kind of means like to know something well enough that you just kind of get it intuitively.
The actual dictionary definition of it in the book, I think, is to drink.
All right.
But I think it's more in the sense in like to drink in knowledge, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's to like fully and wholly understand the thing such that it becomes part of you. But it's interesting the places in which grokking comes up, and you're kind of like, oh yeah, that's interesting. That is a grokkable thing. Or it's funny that he doesn't grok this thing. Like, those are really cool little sci-fi things where it's like we have this one unique little concept. But yeah, other criticisms are just making a bit of a struggle to get through all of these like sci-fi books. But is this a thing you've experienced at all?
I'm not sure. I recognize the thing that you're talking about. I don't know to what extent it is a thing with vintage sci-fi, but I can think of other examples. All right. The thing I really enjoy about old sci-fi is the weird ways technology is used. Like, have you ever read Brave New World?
Yes.
The Huxley book.
Hold on, have I? That sounds familiar. Give me a second. TLD or the plot there for me?
So it's a futuristic dystopia. It's set in England in like 2700 or something, way in the future. And humans don't reproduce biologically anymore. People are grown, and it's divided into this like a completely caste-based society. And like, so you're born into a caste, and that like decides what kind of job you'll have. They don't have families and things anymore. What else? And it's this like one guy's journey and his discovery of a society that's different to theirs and more like traditional humanity. Is that ringing any bells?
Yes, I have read this as confirmed by my Audible app. I didn't get into the book. It didn't do anything for me. It was I don't know. Yeah, it is. That's why I was struggling to think about it. It's not a thing that's left an impression with me at all. But what is it about this that you like?
Well, in that book and like kind of similar stuff in vintage sci-fi, technology is just used in a really weird way. It's like, we achieved whatever by use of an electric ray. That doesn't mean anything. It doesn't make any sense whatsoever. It's just like kind of what's a technology and what's a sci-fi sounding word, and we'll just like stick them together.
This is like typical Star Trek sort of stuff as well, like.
Kind of like that, yeah. But like it's kind of it's more charming to me.
Okay, I get that it can be charming. I don't have the same feelings towards that particular kind of technobabble.
Yeah.
As you do.
It only really works for old stuff for me.
Yeah, that's true. I'm a fan though of Star Trek technobabble because I just think it's just this wonderful sort. It's almost like sci-fi scat. It's just like this sort of word play, and we don't care that the words have no meaning. And every so often we pick up a thing like neutrinos, and we're like, that is a word I know, and then it's immediately followed by diffusion field, and you're like, well, that's irrelevant. And like that, I really get into that. And like people complain about technobabble in Star Trek, I love when they go heavy on it, and it's just this like everyone it almost feels like they're like improvising this nonsense at each other, and I love it so much, even though it's just like fictional solutions to fictional problems in this fictional world, and really we shouldn't care, but I just love the aesthetic. Like, well, we need to like polarize the gamma field, unless or otherwise the neutrino beam won't emit tachyon particles, and it's like, what is this? No one cares. It's glorious. Yeah, but yeah, there you go. Old school sci-fi. It's bugging me currently, and I'm looking forward to getting on to something else. I think I might reread The Dark Tower next, the Stephen King book.
I only read the first one of that. I never got further than well, I got a bit into the second one, and I didn't grab me at all.
I only read the first one. It did grab me, but then I looked.
Yeah, I thought the first one was great.
Yeah. I looked at the length of the preceding books and realized that there was like 7 of them. And I was like, yeah, well, no, thank you, Stephen King. You're all right.
Yeah.
So I will at least make an attempt to reread The Dark Tower, if not read on a little bit more. But they're chunky towards the end, really chunky.
Yeah. But Gunslinger's a great book.
Gunslinger, from what I remember, it's a really great book. And I'm looking forward to reading it again. So, do you have anything else to add?
Don't have anything else to add. Not really. I've done a load of culture stuff recently. I've been to loads of concerts and things, and that's been fun. There was an arts festival in Carlow. So I saw lots of art and music and things. That's been fun. But nothing specific Artifexian relevant comes to mind.
Oh, because me being in Korea is Artifexian relevant. Well, outside of the fact that I am technically Artifexian. But that's a really broad definition of what's relevant. Like anything pertaining to Edgar is suddenly relevant for the podcast.
Things happening in our lives. I think you going to another continent counts as a thing that's happened. That would be interesting to talk about.
Another continent?
Yes. This is how we say it in my accent.
You are not allowed to play that card.
Why not?
Yeah, so... Yeah, that's everything. Should we wrap it up?
Let's leave it there.
Okay, so Bill, thanks as always. Thanks to the listeners for listening. If you want to go help us, you want to go support the show, check out our Patreon page. It's all in the show notes. And we will see you next month for the auspicious episode.
I'm really looking forward to this. My interest has been piqued.
Okay, cool. Bill?
Edgar
out.
Edgar out.
FYI, Bill, it's 27 degrees here and I have no aircon and the window's closed. So if I happen to die halfway through this podcast, just continue on.
At least you'll have died doing what you love.
This is true.
Talking to Bill.